We're going to look at Ephesians chapter 5, verses 21 and 22. So if you have your Bible and you like to go that way, or if you're new to Shoreline Community Church, let me say welcome. My name's Paul Allen, of course, and I'm the lead pastor here at Shoreline, and we are so glad that you're with us today. As Kyle said, you could be a lot of different places, but you came to sing happy birthday to me today, and I sure appreciate that. That was beautiful this morning. I was kind of hoping to fly under the radar. I'm having a hard time with the thought of being on the other side of 50 now, closer to 50 than 40, and I'd rather just skip this one if it was possible, but I guess that's not in the cards. So thank you all for being here today and sharing in that, and I appreciate it. But if you're here for the first time, we are really, really glad that you have joined us today, and we do ask you, please take a moment and fill out those connection cards. We'd love to know who you are and the fact that you're here, and we'd love to send a letter to you and just tell you how much we appreciate you joining with us today. But if you are new, you may not know that inside your bulletin there's a white piece of paper with a bunch of blanks on it, and we take notes here, and it's just another way to kind of be engaged during the message. So if you'd like to pull those out, and also any scripture that I'm going to use today can also be found there. They'll also be on the screen behind me, but it's just another way to follow along, another way to engage with the message this morning. So here's what Ephesians, and if you need a pen, let one of our guys know. They'll gladly swing by and bring a pen to you. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 21 and 22 says this: submit. Everybody say submit. Submit to one another out of reverence for who? Christ. For wives, this means submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Down in verse 25, it says, for husbands, this means love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave his life for her. Now, last week, just by way of review, we're calling this series iMarriage, because we approach marriage dragging along a big I. I imagine marriage will be ... I've always dreamed of being married to a man who is so on and so forth. I can't wait to be married, because then, I'm sure that he or she is going to, or they will. And so we come to the altar, and here's what happens. We come to the altar for our wedding day, and we walk in with a box full of desires. And we say, this is how I desire marriage to be. But here's what happens during that ceremony. Somehow there's an exchange, and we exchange that box of desires. And during that ceremony, we take those desires out of that box, and we move them over into another box called expectations. And on the way out of our ceremony, our wedding ceremony, the wife takes the expectations from her husband. He gives her that box. And the husband takes his box of expectations from his wife. The problem is we don't know that we're carrying this box out of our ceremony. And those desires that we came in with and become expectations so many times go along these lines. We want to be loved. We want to be desired. We want to be cherished. We want to be protected. We want to be respected. We want to be followed. We want to be admired. We want to be listened to. These are all desires that we have coming into our wedding day. And see, here's what happens when we saddle our spouse with my God-given desires. We take them out of that desire box, and what we've done is we've moved them over into expectations. And what happens when we take those out of the desire box and move them into expectations, what happens every single time is expectation takes the joy out of relationship. Expectation takes the love out of relationship. Expectation makes it impossible for me to excel as a husband, because I'm merely getting up to ground level when I do everything I'm expected to do. Expectations are demotivating. You always feel like you're trying to measure up, and you don't get credit for anything. I mean, if I come home and the house is clean, why would I say thank you for that? I expected it to be like that. If I take the dog out, she expected that from me. If I spend time with the kids, that's an expectation, that isn't a desire. So why would I get thanked for that? Now, I talked about last week, if you want to know where you are, you have to evaluate the level of gratitude and spontaneous acts of service. So I hope all over Shoreline Community Church this last week, there was all kinds of spontaneous acts of service. Oh, honey, can I please do this for you? Honey, did you notice that the dishes were done when you got home? Did you notice that I took it on myself to make dinner tonight? There's a video going around of a guy. I don't know how many of you have seen this. I couldn't put it out there because it had some salty language, which really stinks because it was a very funny video. But there's a guy who gets up one day and he says to his wife, basically, he says, I don't know what happened, but every morning I get up and she asked him if, I apologize, she asked him why he hadn't folded the laundry. There's laundry in the basket. And he says, I don't know what happened. Every day I come down here and all the clothes in this basket are miraculously folded and put into my dresser every day. I think the magic has left. He just expected it to be done. Somehow it miraculously happened. I hope all over Shoreline Community Church this last week, guys have been folding laundry. And ladies have been spending time with kids. And we've been saying thank you, and I appreciate that you've done that for me. Listen, here's the bottom line. Expectations put you and your spouse in a debt-to-debtor relationship. I owe you, you owe me, I'll get my way. Just wait and see, right? And we say something like this, as long as you will, I will. I did my part. What's up with you? Why aren't you doing it? Right? Does this sound like anybody's house but the Allens? This morning, when we place expectations on the shoulders of our spouses, they live with this nagging notion. Nothing I do ever pleases him or her. Eventually, guess what that's going to do? It's going to wear your spouse out. So, we ended last week with one question. One question. What does your spouse owe you? What does your spouse owe you? See, your answer to that question will reveal your level of expectations. So, today, I want to answer that question for all of us. But before I start, I have to make a quick disclaimer. If you're here this morning and you're not a Christ follower, you've never made a profession of faith in Jesus Christ, you get to take today off. Okay? So somebody in here just went, woo, woo, yes, this is the best church ever. Because what I'm going to talk about today can only happen between two people who have made Christ Lord of their life. However you take, whatever you take from this is going to be a little different. You can manage your expectations however you choose to, but it's going to be a little differently because what we're going to talk about today can only happen in the life of Christ followers. But I want you to know, this is how we as Christ followers, this is how we handle this dilemma. And it's powerful. I'm telling you this morning, I don't think I've ever said this before. If I ever have, then I'm repeating myself. But today, I promise you, if you catch what I'm talking about today, this will absolutely, positively change your marriage. I promise you today. If you walk out of here and you put into practice what we're going to talk about today, I give you 100% guarantee it will change your marriage. Because when two people embrace this truth, the results are amazing. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to jump right in. You're in your notes this morning. The only way to get everything out of that expectation box and back into the desire box is to conclude, we're going to start where we ended last week, is that your spouse does not owe you anything. The only way we can move things out of the expectation box and put them back into desires. Listen, there's nothing wrong with those desires. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be loved. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be cherished. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be listened to. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be respected. There's nothing wrong with those things. Those are good, God-given desires. But when we saddle those things and we turn those from desires to expectations, we become the debt-to-debtor in our relationship with one another. So we have to try to take those out of the desire box and out of the expectation box and put them where God intended them to be in the desire box. Can we go ahead and dump those in there for me this morning? So here's what we're doing. We're taking them out of the expectation box. We're moving them over into the desire box. See, this is pretty much the essence of Christian marriage. In your notes, a Christian marriage, check this out. A Christian marriage is not one that is run by a Christian code of ethics. A Christian marriage is not something that's run by a Christian code, of conduct. I said ethics. A Christian code of conduct, right? You see guys who follow this, they look at their wives and they go, the Bible says submit, submit, submit. You've seen it. You've seen that guy. Well, that's my wife, you know. They always have the southern accent, I'm sorry. I just have to say this. I'm sorry. This is totally, but Tony Romo broke a vertebrae in his back already. The dude is already out for 10 weeks of the season. Retire. Just retire. Okay? Amen? Amen. Well, that's our church this morning. God bless you. For those of you who are new from Texas, I hate Dallas. I'm a big Eagles fan. Oh, good. So let's just agree together right now in prayer that Tony Romo is going to retire and we'll be done with him, okay? Wouldn't that be great? Okay. I'm just kidding. Okay. So that's all for free. That's under the anointing of the Holy Spirit. So it must be true. Okay? Right? And there's that guy, and he says, well, the Bible says submit. You got to submit, woman. All right? We have a Christian marriage. So Christian marriage, right, is where the woman submits. Listen. That's not a Christian marriage. That's the kind of marriage that makes lawyers and counselors and pharmacists rich. Okay? It's not a marriage where everyone's trying to get everyone else to act. Check this out. This is not a Christian marriage when you're trying to make your spouse act like a Christian. That's not Christian marriage, right? A healthy Christian marriage, in your notes, is where you realize you owe God so much that you desire or you want to express your gratitude to God through your family. Isn't it sad that the people that we treat less with godly love are the people that we spend the most time with? Should it not be the opposite? Should we not want to? Should we not desire? Should it not be the cry of our heart of anybody, guys, of anybody that we want to demonstrate what God has done for us? Would we not want that to be our wife? See, the Bible expressly demonstrates for us that the greatest tangible outgrowth of our spiritual walk, the way it should look most Christ-like, should be in our marriages. And so if we have gratitude to God for what He's done for us, that should seep out in how we treat and act around our family. See, great marriages are not built around a code of conduct. You do, I do. If you will, then I will. If you do that, then I do this. You've got these rules, I've got those rules, and we got to make sure everybody's abiding by the rules. What's that sound like? Doesn't sound like marriage to me. It sounds like a great recipe for family counseling. Great marriages are not built around a code of conduct or roles or exchanges of service or even common interests. Check this out. Great marriages are built around mutual. Everybody say mutual. They're built around mutual submission for Christ's sake. For whose sake? That's a big deal. We're going to talk about that. Ephesians 5:21 says this, submit to one another out of reverence for who? For Christ. Check this out. This is the part that will change your marriage. Submission. Submission is placing the needs, the desires, the dreams of someone else ahead of I. Right? We got to get our I out of here. So you know how I do that? I put their dreams, I put their ambitions, I put their best interests, I put those before mine. See, the motivating force, it doesn't say out of reverence for one another. Paul didn't say, out of just sheer love for one another. No. Why? Because we fail in that, don't we? Listen, you could say you have a pure love for anybody in the world, but you know what? All of our loves are flawed. We don't understand real love. And so if it was to be based on our mutual love for one another, that would fall short, because it always falls short. See, it's not based on because I promised to, right? Don't we do that? Well, don't you remember the wedding vows? Don't you remember what you said? Right? It's not out of because I promised to. And it's not because, listen, check this out. It's not out of because we are following the laws of Christian marriage, right? Well, you know, it's a Christian marriage. We're Christians, so we have to, and we need to, and we should. That's going to fall short too. Why? Because I'm me and you're you. And it can't be based on because, you know, look at how Pastor Paul and Lori treat each other. Or look at how Pastor Josue, and look at how that couple, and how we can't live up to somebody else's standards, because you know what? Their standards are flawed as well. And so the standard is this: we submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Christ. He becomes the reason we do what we do. He's the reason why the why behind how I act and how I treat and how I respond to and how I... See, we're to express our gratitude to God through our, in your notes, treatment of the person we married. I say, God, thank you. Thank you that you first loved me. Thank you that you saved me. Thank you that even though I was lost in my sin, thank you that even though I didn't want anything to do with you, thank you that because I was far away from you, you still love me. And you know what? I'm going to express my love for you and how I treat and how I respond to and how I honor and how I put the needs of my wife before myself. Us, we say something like this: God, how can I say thanks? You love me in spite of me. You forgave me. You promised me. What can I do for you? And God says, nothing. Nothing. You can't do anything for me. I'm perfect. Everything's met in me. I'm fulfilled in myself. I don't need you to do anything to complete me. But you go do the same for your husband or your wife, for their sake. Or for my sake, not for theirs. You go treat them this way, not because they deserve it, not because anything they've done, not because you're keeping count. You treat them that way because of your love for me. And you know what we do? We respond something like this: okay, God, are there any other options? Says, is there another way? Listen. I haven't been tithing, but I was thinking maybe I could do tithe and 11%. You know? Or maybe I could volunteer for something. Anything but changing how I treat my spouse. Because that's hard. There's history. Verse 22 says this: for wives, this means submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Wives, submit as to who? To the Lord. Put your husband first as you put the Lord first. Everybody make the triangle we made last week, remember? We made the triangle last week. Who's at the top of that triangle? Help me out. God, right? And at the bottom of that triangle is your husband and wife, right? And our first priority as both of us is to what? Get closer to God. If He's the center of your life, if He's the center of your passion, if He's the one that matters most, then guess what? This is going to be really, really easy. Because if you put God first, then you know what? You're going to be able to put your husband, or wives, you're going to be able to put your husband before yourself. If I want to know how committed you are to the Lord, you just got to look at the way you place your husband's needs, wishes, and dreams ahead of yours. You cannot place your spouse's needs above your own if your expectation, in your notes, if your expectation box is full. Listen to me, ladies. You can't do it. You can't do it. You can't go, honey, I'm putting you first, but you know what? I expect you to, and you're supposed to, and you ought to, and you made that promise. We stood there in front of my mommy and my dad. And you said, and we say something like this, but Pastor, you don't, but he. And my response to that is, I know he doesn't deserve it. And God's response to this is, I know he doesn't deserve it. That's the point. He doesn't deserve it, just like you didn't deserve God's grace. And the overflow of our gratitude for God's grace is how we treat, ladies, it's how we treat our husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Guys, here's the practicality of this. This means that we lay down our lives for our wives just as Christ laid down his life for the church. Guys, in your notes, our wives should feel as if we would lay down our lives in order to protect them emotionally, physically, and financially. Our ladies need to know that we've got them. They need to feel protected. They need to feel security. They need to know that you're taking care of them and that your interest comes second and their interest comes first. Guys, it means you might even have to give up a couple of those electronic gadgets. Oh, this just got real. Or maybe a boat or a motorcycle. What? They need to know, listen guys, they need to know that they come first. And you go, but she, you just don't know what it's like, Pastor Paul. She's so hard and difficult. She nags all the time. I know. She doesn't deserve it. That's the point. You can't do this as long as your expectation box is full. We got to empty those expectation box and just love them because Christ loved us. But that's hard. Yeah, I know. But that's like really, really hard. Yeah. That's kind of the point. But you know what? If we're doing it for Christ and not for them, then all that other stuff doesn't matter. Here's how it all comes together. See, I can't put Lori's desires ahead of my expectations until I get my expectations back in the proper box. And the only way to do that is to decide that she doesn't owe me anything. Yeah, but she hasn't. And I come home and the house looks like, and I can't even believe it. I came home and dinner wasn't done. And I told you last week how much I enjoy my mom's roast, and my wife learned it, but she doesn't even make roast like my mama made it. It's just don't know. It's hard. The struggle is real, Pastor. Let me say this again. The only way this happens is when I decide that she doesn't owe me anything. And the only way to conclude that is to quit viewing my relationship to her through the lens of her promises to me and to view the relationship instead through the lens of God's grace to me. Oh, honey, it's okay. It's all right. Because I'm loving you because Christ loved me. You know what? Even if you don't, I will. Even if you can't, I'm going to. Even if you refuse to, I'm still going to. See, check this out. Only then am I free to love. See, a Christian marriage is where I gets replaced with not my spouse's initials, that I comes down and in its place goes up a J. And that J is for Jesus. It's not about I, and it's not about you. It's about Jesus. See, the basis of the answer to the question is Calvary. And that's why I can't give this to someone who's not a Christ follower. I can't give this advice to someone who's not a Christ follower. If you're not a Christ follower, none of this matters. None of this means anything because it all comes back to the cross. See, if you erase Calvary, then this doesn't make any sense at all. It's a battle of the eyes, right? The eyes are colliding. And guess what? Here's what happens. When the eyes are colliding, guess who wins? I wins every time. Not you. Certainly not Jesus. I. So, in your notes, your objection, right? Here's your objection. But if I take the pressure off, and if I take everything out of the expectation box, if I just give in, I'm afraid that he or she won't. And here's where I made a big mistake this morning. I'm supposed to have a rope, so I need everybody to use your imagination. I don't know how I walked out of my house without my rope. But here's what happens. We take our rope that we've got our spouse connected to, right? We've got them tethered to our expectations. And we say, no, you can't do that. You can't, and we tug on that rope, right? We use it, we tug on that rope by nagging. We tug on that rope by manipulation. We tug on that rope by fighting or taking away the finances. We tug on it. No, you can't. Don't you die. You're trying. Quit trying to get away. Quit trying to escape. Pastor Paul, you don't know if I take any pressure off of this, if I let it down for just a moment, they're like, they just run wild. They just do whatever they want. It's amazing. So I have to keep picking up the rope. I have to lay down the law. I got to remind them. Hey, you know what laying down the law is? You know what this rope is? You know what that's called? Parenting. Not marriage. You know what, ladies? Your husband didn't marry his mom. Guys, your wife didn't marry her daddy. And what we try to do with that rope is we try to be mama and we try to be daddy. And what we're really doing is we're parenting. And this isn't a marriage. So guess what's going to happen? Happens every time, right? Have you ever had something on a leash? What do they do? They pull, don't they? I love watching the people. We have this lady at our condo. Her dog walks her. Right? It's the funniest thing watching her take the dog out. The dog walks her. You know what? You know what happens when anything's tethered? It resists. It resists. Does that sound like your marriage? Don't raise your hand. And you go, but you, stop, quit, don't. That makes, no, I expect you, but you're supposed to. Don't quit. Don't do that. Why every time? And what you're eventually going to do when you've had them tethered to your expectations, you're going to drive them away. And the stronger you hold on to this idea of control, and the stronger you try to make them live up to your expectations, the more likely you are to push them away. Can I tell you something this morning? Your only hope is to let go of the rope. Let go of the rope. That's the only way that you can love and be loved. Now, if you're afraid lest he or she's going to take off, I want you to know this. You have ensured that you will never experience what God intended in marriage. It can never, ever, ever happen under those circumstances. Ever. Because that isn't the way God created. God did not create marriage to be an extension of parenting. It can't happen under those circumstances. It can't. Everybody pulls back. Everyone. And what becomes very evident is that your experience, listen, here's what's happening with that rope. Let me pick the rope up again, using your imagination. Here's what happens with that rope. What you're doing is you are taking all your experiences as you grew up, and what you're doing is you're attaching them to this rope, right? So what happens with this rope is, if your dad was someone who ran around, every time your husband, right, gets home a little late, what are you doing? Hey, where are you? What are you doing? What are you doing? You're pulling the rope. Why are you late? What you're doing is you're bringing your childhood into your marriage, right? If your daddy gambled away everything, if he wasn't a good provider, or maybe he was a great provider, but he worked all the time, and he wasn't there emotionally, right? So as soon as your husband's late, what are you doing? You're pulled on the rope. Well, I left you 18 voicemails in 12 minutes. I mean, how could you not respond, right? My phone was off. The battery died. Oh, sure it did. Yeah, right. What are we doing? We're pulling on the rope, right? If your mother ran around, right? She drank, she never gave you attention, and as soon as your wife, right? Well, I want to leave for the weekend. I thought I'd go on the church retreat. No. You're here for me, woman. You don't leave. That doesn't happen in our house. You don't go. You don't do. You don't. No. I've got you tethered real tight. Is that how it feels? And what we do, as soon as we feel that resistance, what do? We just tug on it. Just little nagging, a little prodding, a little reminder. That's not what a Christian home looks like. Right? Please hear me this morning. What you need more than anything, and let me go back to this for just a second before I say this. It could be good things too. Well, our family, we always did everything together. What do you mean you want to take a vacation, just the two of us, and we don't bring all 15 of our family with us? No, that's not, right? We can't ever be alone. Are you kidding me? Oh, we have to talk, right? Hear me. What you need more than anything else in the world is what your spouse cannot give you, as long as you insist on prodding, nagging, reminding, and tugging. Listen. You need to experience unconditional and ungoaded love. Love that says, I love you even if you don't. I love you even if I feel uncomfortable for a moment. I love you even if it doesn't meet my emotional needs. I love you. I love you. Because Christ loves me. I love you because Christ gave himself for me. I love you because Christ, his grace has changed my life. And I'm going to love you the way that Christ has loved me. Listen, you know what this means? It means that there has to be space. It means there has to be space. It means we have to put down the leash. Yeah, but what if they run off? Let me tell you something. That's between them and God. That's between them and God. You go, yeah, but no. That's between them and God. When you give it to God, when you finally surrender it to God and you say, God, even if they don't, even if they run off, even if they leave me, even if they don't love me, even if they don't reciprocate it back to me, I'm going to love them because you have loved me. And because I've experienced unconditional love for you, all I'm ever going to do is express and give and lavish unconditional love on my spouse, no matter what they do, where they go, how they treat me, and how this ends on their part. All I know is I'm going to do my part, and I'm going to give them space. In your notes, space requires the opportunity to give before being reminded. Honey, I'm just saying, don't forget. Right? How many times do we do that? I'm just saying. I said to my daughter last night, she and Ethan made me pizza and wings last night. And they were awesome. Right? And there was a mound of dishes. And I was like, peace out. I'm going to bed. But I'm just saying, Mom's been gone for the weekend. And if those dishes are there when Mom gets home, I'm not going to be around. Now listen, I reminded them of the consequences that are going to occur, even as much as I enjoy. See, I could have reciprocated this. I could have lived out this sermon, but I was like, it's my birthday. I'm going to bed, right? I got my moment, okay? So I didn't. Bad model, right? But don't we do this in marriage all the time? I just saying, honey, don't forget. Don't forget, babe. Don't forget. I'm just saying. Let's save ourselves a lot of heartache now. If you came out of difficult family situations, you will always have a tendency to place on your spouse expectations that were not met in your family of origin. And we all have them. Doesn't matter how great your family was, we all have them. You can have the perfect family, but we all have them. And once you do that, he or she is going to live with the burden of pleasing someone that can't be pleased. And you will never, ever feel loved because you have removed, listen, you've removed the margin that's necessary for love. And the result is this in your notes. Your fear will become a reality. And guess what? You're going to be disappointed in marriage. This isn't what I expected. Oh, I expected that my husband, I expected that my wife, I expected it would look like, I expected it to be like. And the problem with all these expectations that we're tugging and pulling on and tethering our spouse to, the problem with it is they can't meet them ever. And the result is you come knocking on the pastor's door one day and you go, but pastor, I don't feel loved. It's not a matter of feeling loved. It's a matter of all these expectations are removing the one thing that you need, and that's margin. See, because it's in the margin, it's in the space that we get to demonstrate love for one another. I didn't expect that. Wow. It's so neat. Have you ever had that moment where your husband or your wife does something you didn't expect? I didn't expect that. And here, listen, if all the expectations go down, that happens all the time. I didn't expect you to mow the lawn. Wow. Thank you. I didn't expect you to take the garbage out. That was awesome. I didn't expect you to kick your entire family out so we could spend the night together. That was cool. You with me? You getting it? Does that make sense? See, I've never seen a marriage heal or get any better because somebody laid down the law and forced or coerced someone into keeping his or her vows. You know what you said. You did it. You don't know what you said? Let me go get the videotape. I've got it here on my phone. Ha! However, I've seen marriages healed when two people decide to love each other because Christ first loved them. I've seen them healed when one person lets go. See, someone's going to have to make the first move. I say this all the time. You want your marriage to get 50% better tomorrow? today, I can make your marriage 50% better right now. Right now. You start. Yeah, but no. You start loving them out of your reverence for Christ. But she, you know, she'll go nuts, man. No. I'm creating space. I'm moving expectations out of expectations to desires. And when they become desires, I'm overwhelmed when they happen. And now we have space to love. In conclusion, as the worship team comes, see, whatever it is you believe your spouse owes you sets the level of your expectations, and guess what? It also sets the level of your disappointments. And as long as he or she is saddled with your expectations, you can neither give nor receive love, because it won't be felt as love. It's going to, listen. When we saddle each other with expectations, all it ever feels like, they come down all the time. You guys don't have to watch them. Everybody's like, wow. It's people. Wow. Okay. They're all a lot better looking than me. I understand it. Okay. Focus with me for just a few seconds more. Because what we do when we put all these expectations on each other, when we saddle each other with expectations, all that can happen with expectations is disappointments. It's the end conclusion of it. But you didn't, of course they couldn't, they can't, nobody can. It's impossible. The only way to get your expectations back in the desire box is you have to get I out of the middle. It's to decide that he or she doesn't owe you anything and to love them out of reverence for Christ. See, here's what happens. It happens when we declare that you don't owe me anything. That doesn't feel right. Yep. It's going to go against every inclination. But, what? You don't owe me anything. Pastor Paul, you sure? You don't owe me anything. And so we take those expectations, pick up that box and dump them back to our desire box. Boy, I wish it'd be great, it'd be wonderful, but you know what? I don't expect it anymore. All I know is I'm going to love you first. I'm going to love you best. I'm going to love you right. And I'm not doing it out of what you've done for me or how you've treated me or how you're going to treat me or what our past is or how it looks like, or even if I had a bad meal today, it doesn't matter. All I know is I'm going to love you because Christ loves. And I'm going to honor you. And I'm going to put your needs and your desires above mine. Maybe your question is, but what about my expectations and my disappointments? What about my desires and my disappointments? What about them? What about them? Well, you got to come back next week. Can't take off for Labor Day. You got to come back next week. Because we're going to look at the one person who can bring satisfaction to your marriage. Can I say something? If you're here this morning and you're not a Christ follower, boy, you really should become one. You should consider this today, because following Christ is just an amazing thing. And I'll tell you why. Everybody gets this mixed up. That's a bunch of rules and regulations and do's and don'ts, but it's not at all. Because when we follow Christ, as so many in this room have done, we get to live out our lives the way that we were created to and the way that works best. And it brings all the fulfillment and all the joy and all of that comes around because the architect of our lives now becomes the one who guides us. Now becomes the one who leads us. I just want to challenge you this morning. If you're not a Christ follower, maybe you consider that today. If you're here this morning and you're married and you want to remove your expectations from your expectation box and you want to put them back in the desire box, I'm going to ask you real quick, would you just raise your hand this morning? You say, God, I want you to help me to move what should be desires out of my expectation box and put them in the desire box. Thank you for those hands. Just quick hand up. You can put them back down. Thank you. Thank you. This is not for me. This is for Christ. Anybody else? Anybody else? I'm going to ask everybody to stand with me this morning as we close in prayer. Then we're going to leave here with a song that's going to have us singing all day. All the way to 2 o'clock at our baptism. Love for you to come. Boy, this is a big celebration for us at 2 o'clock. We just come and we love on those who are being baptized. And we'd love for you to come and join us at 17 Side Hill Road. Even if it's your first time here, you can come and join us. The address is in your bulletin. Let's pray. Husbands, grab your wives' hands. If you're engaged, grab your future spouse's hand. If you'd really like to date the person that's next to you, no. We don't play that here. Heavenly Father, thank you that you sent your Son to die for us. Grace, unmerited, undeserved. We have a blueprint for how we can treat our spouses. Lord, help us. Help us because it's so hard to remove expectations. It's easy to say this, it's hard to do it. Help us to love one another the way that you loved us. Help us to put our spouse, their needs, their desires before our own. God, I pray that our marriages would just look crazy because we're constantly putting the other one. No, you go. No, you. No, you. Absolutely. No, I'll wait for you. You go. The only arguments we ever have is who gets to win on serving the other one. God, I pray that you would remind us to build that space, to quit nagging, to quit pulling, to quit tugging that expectation rope, that control rope, to build a space that we can be loved the way that we desire. And this is tough because emotionally this kind of puts us out in free fall, but God, it's okay because you're there. And like we're going to talk about next week, we've already found that kind of love that we are looking for. We just need to make sure that we are connected to it. So I pray this week, I pray that all over Shoreline Community Church in our homes this next week, that those expectations would come down. Desires would be where they're supposed to be, and that we would just love, just support, just honor, just put the other first out of reverence for you. We ask this in the name of Jesus.